I can hear Ali Akbars from the hospital now. In the buildings all around us, we've got Bixie, we've got entrenched positions with Bixies, we've got snipers. They're the ones who will engage with ISIS if they actually leave their position. But it's quite nerve-wracking being on a stairwell, not being able to see exactly what's going on. Not being able to know exactly what's going on. Fuck. When I moved to London, it was incredible. I was from the countryside and I was in a city where there was so much happening. I was in a market which was the largest in the world, the foreign exchange market, where trillions of dollars are traded every single day. Because I was reading the newspapers so much, because I was so involved and so plugged into what was happening in the world, I started following the events in the Middle East and the rise of the Islamic State. Fucking cow. Whoa, no, Airstrike! I came out of this meeting and I picked up a newspaper, and on the front cover was a man on his knees in an orange jumpsuit, and standing above him was another man, a British man called Jihadi John, about to execute him.
So just as your missiles continue to strike our people, our knife will continue to strike the necks of your people. We take this opportunity to warn those governments who have entered this evil alliance of America against the Islamic State to back off and leave our people alone.
And time again, throughout history, we've seen massacres. We've seen famines. We've seen a moment in history where action was needed to avert disaster, and we failed. The mortar's landing just in front of our position, just here. And one landed. Again, about! Shit! Ooh. That landed just behind us. Fuck, and it didn't go off. That landed literally on top of our building. There was an ongoing crisis. There was an ongoing genocide against the Yazidi people. And I was sitting at my desk in London thinking, am I the only one who's screaming here, who's crying out for someone to do something? And Britain and America didn't have a plan, and by going out myself, it was the ultimate act of solidarity and internationalism. Hopefully that plane's coming. Here we go. It is one of the most strangest things about life, that if you want to give up your life, if you want to actually do something for someone else, for a stranger, and to be selfless for them, you actually have to be selfish to the ones that love you the most. So one of the things that weighed on my mind was the fact that if I'm killed out there, it's a life sentence for my family. And it was something that weighed very heavily on my shoulders when I decided to go out. So when I arrived in Syria for the first time, I was given just a week's training by the YPG, but just after a week they put a rifle in my hands and they sent me off to the front for the first time. There's the constant level of gunfire around us, but thankfully it's 6:30 in the morning and most people are asleep. Got an airstrike coming in. We've got, I'm afraid the sun's in our eyes here, but just around the corner is the Islamic State, and that's where the airstrike came in. On the other side of this school, there's the Islamic State as well, just around this corner. It's quite funny that ISIS always portrayed themselves as a bastion, as a safe space for Muslims all around the world, that you couldn't quite be a Muslim if you lived in the West. When these naive young Muslims went out to join ISIS, they realized that they weren't joining a Muslim organization, they were joining a fascist organization, something that was destroying people's lives out in Syria. A group that was murdering people, that was enslaving women, that was shooting people in ditches and threatening to rip apart the Middle East, was rampaging across the countryside and hurting people. I went as an internationalist to stand alongside these people as the ultimate act of solidarity and say to them, look, you're not alone. When you're on the front line, it's just chaos, particularly when you go on an operation to seize a bit of territory or to go into a building. The Islamic State likes to ambush. It'll like to draw you in, and when it does, it'll hit you with everything it's got. It was just constant. The Islamic State had invested in its own technology. They used drones to drop bombs on us. He's fucking low, look out, this fucking cunt. I wanted to show everyone some very sophisticated American and coalition drones. These have either been shot down by ISIS or they've crashed because of some technical issue. They're incredibly, you can tell they're very sophisticated, and there's been a clear attempt by ISIS to reverse engineer. You can actually see, this is just a quick diagram that they drew on a quick board here, just talking about the internals of some of the machines you see around me. There's other writings on the walls where they've attempted to draw the wingspan and just put together a lot of the data that they've sort of gleaned from what they've found here. And then you've actually seen some pretty amateurish attempts at copying the American drones, and it's a clear indication that ISIS are really investing in drone technology. I'm in Raqqa at the moment, and they're using drones to huge effect. Drones that drop bombs, mostly civilian drones that haven't been manufactured by them, but they have been alterated. This is the first time I've ever seen drones that they've started from scratch to implement. So a clear investment in technology right here. They fired rockets at us. They sent suicide vehicles against us, and they wouldn't let up. I was fighting in stairwells, in alleyways, and I was fighting in the streets. We've got, so fucking hell, one went over my head. We've suicide vehicle, suicide vehicle, suicide vehicle. Fucking bullets whizzing over my fucking head. Ooh, fucking hell. ISIS would sometimes be just 10 meters away from you. Often they were in the building next door, so you could hear them running up and down stairwells. You could hear them shouting, calling out to each other. You have to put blankets over the windows because of the amount of sniper activity. And what's quite interesting, down here, logistics point, they just throw food from Humvees. We come and collect it at night. I got as close to the Islamic State as you could possibly get. We were taking positions where ISIS had been living. Islamic State training facility. So we would attack a position, we'd drive them out, and we'd be sleeping in their beds. We'd be eating their food. Bomb making material. We'll be using their ammunition against them. This is somewhere for them to do martial arts training. There's some medical books as well. Syringes on the ground as well. I don't know if that's an indication of drug use themselves or whether it's something. It's all in Russian. There's a lot of Russian material in here. So the Battle of Raqqa was one of the worst fights I've ever been involved in. Shit. Fucking cunt. I went as a medic where I would go on operations, and as soon as one of my comrades was injured, I would be the first person to get to him and to treat him. As the months progressed, the fighting got more dangerous as ISIS became desperate. They were well entrenched, and there was a lot of IEDs. So it was probably the worst environment that I'd ever been in all my time in Syria. There's an airstrike coming in. Which building's going down? Interest.
Yeah, you see the kind of sort of crumbled building?
Uh-huh.
Behind it is a big granite tower.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
That's one down and one next to it.
Christian, holy shit. He's toast, man. Goodbye,
So that was the sniper that we've been battling for the past 4 days.
There's just been so many occasions where I've had so many close calls, but in the big scheme of things, if I was ever afraid, I probably would have gone home. You just have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and just keep on going because you're there for a reason. I think some people in the UK, they forget that we are in an interconnected world, that everything that happens across the other side of the world really does affect us. From Manchester to London Bridge to the spread of global terrorism, the events in Syria are incredibly linked. There's no doubt that over the years I have seen the best and worst in people. I've seen the worst where I've captured Islamic State phones, and I've seen the images of them decapitating people, shooting people, and just the most horrendous things that are almost unspeakable. But at the same time, for every horrible thing that I've seen from ISIS, I've seen local people building hospitals, rebuilding their communities, talking about democracy, making great friendships with local people, and just really taking part in a revolution that's truly indigenous and truly progressive. Because we hear so much about ISIS that we really forget that for every ISIS member, there's 100 lovely, progressive human beings out there who are doing everything they can to destroy ISIS and build a future for themselves. So being part of this movement is a real honour for me and something that I'm very proud to be part of.